So in chapter 11, we're going to be talking about imperfect competition. Uh, we've talked a lot so far about perfect competition and monopolies, but markets usually don't actually fall into one of those two categories. Um, the perfect competition case, I stress that a lot of times we're just sort of talking about farmers or other commodity markets where the producers don't get to set their prices, and there's very few pure monopolies that are still in existence today. Um, that's why in the last chapter there weren't that many examples of the real world stuff. It talks about natural monopolies, utility companies, and that sort of thing. But very few markets are actually full monopolies. In this chapter, we're exploring market structures that are referred to collectively sort of as imperfect competition. These are market structures with characteristics between the perfect competition case and the monopoly case. In order to do this, we have to relax a bunch of assumptions to examine markets in a more realistic manner. This means allowing for varying degrees of competition, allowing for differentiated products, and allowing for strategic behavior. The first of these market structures that we're going to talk about is oligopoly. This is usually between a small number of firms. We can have a case of two firms, and that's a lot of the examples that we'll see this chapter. But oligopoly isn't strictly two firms. You can talk about three firms, four firms, five firms. Um, in general, it's just a small number of firms where each company's actions influence what the other companies do. uh, the market clears, but it require the assumptions that we're going to use require that no company wants to change its behavior via its price or quantity once it knows what its competitors are doing. um, so the first thing that we're going to talk about is collusions and cartels. Um, Oligopoly behavior occurs when firms coordinate and collectively act as a monopoly to gain monopoly profits. So, with collusion and cartels, we have firms that make identical products. The firms agree to coordinate their quantity and pricing decisions, and no firm deviates from the agreement, even if it's breaking in the firm's best interests. The big problem, though, with cartels and with collusion is that there's always an incentive to cheat. Imagine that we have a situation with two firms, A and B, and they're producing identical products. Their inverse demand curve is P equals 20 minus Q, and their marginal cost is $4. If they collude, they'll produce the monopoly output, the monopoly Q. You can see this, you can find this out by equating the marginal revenue and marginal cost, as always. So our marginal revenue is 20 minus 2Q, and our marginal cost is 4. So 20 minus 2Q equals 4, Q equals 8. If we plug that 8 into our price equation, P equals 20 minus 8, we'll have a monopoly price of 12, and total profits will be 64. If we assume that they split production because they're coordinating, then each firm produces 4 units, 8 divided by 2, and each firm will earn $32 in profit, 64 divided by 2. Uh, but each firm has the incentive to defect. So, what happens if firm A decides to produce 5 units instead of 4? Total production then becomes 9 units instead of 8, and total industry profit will fall. Again, we have the same inverse demand curve, P equals 20 minus Q. The new price will be 11. We got to plug in 9 quantity for Q, so P equals 20 minus 9. So our new price is 11, and the total profits will be $63 instead of $64. However, since firm A has decided to produce 5 units instead of 4, firm A increases their own profit. So we have our profit equation, the price minus the cost times the quantity produced by firm A. In this case, we have our price of 11 minus the 4 marginal cost times 5. That's the quantity that firm A is producing. So firm A earns a profit of $35, whereas before they were earning a profit of $32. What about firm B? Firm B's profit necessarily goes down. Their subject to the $11 price, so 11 minus 4 stays the same. But since they're only producing 4 units like they were supposed to, firm B doesn't defect. Firm A is the one who defects. So firm B only ends up making $28 in profit. This is less than before, and it's less than what firm A makes in profit. So this incentive to defect makes it difficult in the long run to maintain these collusive agreements. However, there are some things that make collusion easier. Um, there are things that you can do that help sustain these agreements. The first is to make it easy to detect and punish cheaters. In the previous case, if if firm B had information that firm A was going to defect, they could institute some sort of punishment. If there's little variation in marginal costs across producers, then it's difficult to share profits if production costs vary uh, greatly across the cartel producers. If it's more expensive for one firm to produce than others, then that firm has more incentive to cheat than they would if the marginal costs were the same. Uh, Also, long time horizons make defection more costly, since future monopoly profits are given more weight. Basically, all the examples that we've talked about so far have been sort of snapshots of a market, but markets don't just exist at one point in time, they exist for long periods of time. Different markets have different lifespans, but in general, if you have two firms that are competing for a long period of time and they collude, they have an incentive to collude for a long period of time because if one of them cheats and the other one punishes the cheater, then that punishment might get carried forward forever. Basically, firms keep grudges just like people do.